But we're going to start off with a little interactive game here, all right? So we're going to play a little Name That Logo. So we're going to see how wise you are, okay, with this. So there are 5, and I put them in what I thought was increasing levels of difficulty. All right. So let's see how good you are. Here's number 1. Low-hanging fruit. Do you know this one? Gatorade. That's right. Gatorade. Okay. Little sugar, yellow dye, number 5. We're all good. All right. Here's number 2. Microsoft. Okay. Small startup, you may have heard of it. All right, number 3. Tesla. Everybody's favorite electric car. All right, number 4. I put this one in on purpose. Yes. Doctor Who. Don't say I don't love you, all right? All right, and number 5. Okay, do you know this one? Okay. We'll come back to this one. But I'm going to ask you to think here. We're going to get back to logo number 5 here in a moment, but I'm going to ask you to do something here. I want you to think quietly to yourself and reflect on 2 questions. And I'm going to give you a minute of time, okay, to think about this, and then we'll do a little bit of sharing as we go, a little bit of interaction. All right, but here's the first question. And I'm asking this in a serious way, all right? So if you're in like goofy mode, and let's see how funny I can be, don't. Okay, I'm asking this in a serious way, all right? So what could make, I'm going to give you a minute to just think. So I should hear the sound of thinking, all right? 1 minute, what would make an app dangerous? Okay, the second question I'm going to ask you is related, kind of, and that's this question. At what point do you say, regarding an app, I just can't or I just won't use it? Where's that line where you just say, I could, but I'm going to choose not to, all right? 1 minute. This last question is a question that your generation is going to have to increasingly ask. And you're going to have to make decisions. And you're going to have to do so, in a sense, on your own. Right? It was one of the hard. Parenting is tough. Ask any parent. Parenting is really tough. But one of the things that is really challenging for this current group of this current generation's parents, of which I'm a part, we can't look back at our childhood and go, I remember this. We didn't have something like this, all right? What we had were a lot of single-function devices. So if you had a music player, that's all it did. And so if you said, you know, my parents, if they grounded me from TV, it was pretty easy to enforce because a TV was actually a TV. And it was a big, giant, 1,000-pound box in the living room. And it had a remote, and it had 36 channels. Half of which were dumb. So it was really easy to just go, I can observe you watching TV, don't do that. Now, you may watch a lot of TV, just never on an actual TV. So it gets harder for parents to try and navigate through that. And so this question of, should I or shouldn't I use this app, is going to have to be something that you think about. And what we're going to try to do today is to help you think about that process. I'm going to focus on an app, but it's not just about this app. It's about apps in general and just social media and online life. Right? So we're going to take a look at this app called Yik Yak. Now, when I asked you the first 4 logos, I got a large response quickly. Based on what I got when Yik Yak came up, just about a dozen of you have heard of it. Okay? A lot of people, I had a high school kid who's pretty in the know about things. He was looking at my notes beforehand, and he was like, I know what those logos are, and he lists off the first four, and then he gets to the fifth one, and he's like, I have no idea what that is. This is a heads up type chapel. So if you're not familiar with Yik Yak, here's what it is.
New tonight, now it's one of the newest and fastest growing apps, and it can also be dangerous. It's called Yik Yak, and some say bullies use it, even criminals. CBS 2's Alice Gaynor explains it allows you to send texts without a trace.
Twitter, Snapchat, Google Hangout. The world of social media can be dizzying with new apps and sites appearing every day. Now adding to the confusion, Yik Yak, an app that allows users to text anonymously that's led to bullying, taunting, and nameless threats of violence.
There's supposed to be a shooting at 1 o'clock.
Across the country, anonymous users are threatening everything from shootings to bomb threats, wreaking havoc in communities, causing school lockdowns, even evacuations.
One said, watch out, I'm going to shoot up St. Ignatius School.
That warning was in Alabama, but New Jersey cyberbullying expert Perry Aftab says it could happen anywhere because she believes Yik Yak is really about one thing.
This site, in the guise of giving anonymity and the ability to express yourself, is encouraging hate.
It's taken bullying and taunting to new heights because kids have no fear of getting caught.
It's causing a lot of problems with self-esteem and friendships are being lost and stuff, so it's not really good.
Taunting became so bad in the Chicago area, some schools threatened disciplinary action against kids using Yik Yak to bully others. Elsewhere, letters to parents sound the alarm. Parents we talked to are clearly worried.
I think it's a really bad idea right off the bat.
Kids don't have any sense of the consequences of what they do. It shouldn't be allowed at all.
That's not a good idea. And kids are so vulnerable at that age.
Yik Yak did not respond to CBS 2's requests for an interview, but its website explains the company approach, saying, quote, anonymity levels the playing field. It gives people a blank slate to work from, removing all preconceptions about them. But experts disagree and warn that it's the anonymity itself that leads to trouble.
If your kids are on an anonymous site, they're there for no good. Either they're going to be hurt or they're going to be hurting others.
In light of the Chicago controversy, Yik Yak recently disabled the app in the Chicago area, and the company said it will try to prevent it from being used at high schools or middle schools. Alice Gaynor, CBS 2 News.
My only complaint with how that was done was that who are they talking about? Kids. As if adults don't struggle with the same issue. I could do a 3-hour chapel just showing you examples of politicians, musicians, athletes, and celebrities who have screwed up their lives and the lives of others with something like this. It's not just a kid problem. I think it's a greater risk for teenagers, partly because of brain development issues, but this is a larger issue than just kids. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about Yik Yak, and you may have some questions. So just like we did last week, I think it worked really well. If you have a question about anything presented in chapel today, you can text it to the number on the screen. It will go to Mr. Nelson's phone. He will come up towards the end, and we'll do some live Q&A. The rest of the questions will go to Dear Abby for the B Hall board. All right? So if you have a question about Yik Yak or anything we're talking about here, go ahead and ask it. Otherwise, you can just put your phone away, and we will proceed. All right, so here's what Yik Yak is about, all right? And what I want you to do is start to think about how this is presented. So there's got to be this question of, okay, here's what it is. How do I feel about that? We've got to be thoughtful as to how things come across to us. So it talks about here, the anonymous social wall for anything and everything. Two of the most important words that I can get across to you are time and place. There's a time and there's a place for things. But anything and everything, what we found out, tends to go badly. And what you get is a whole lot of stuff that you don't want. Because anything and everything really means there's no filter. And one of the things that history has shown us is that human beings need filters. So it's this idea where you can come across and say whatever you want. And the second part, without accountability. Accountability helps you think twice about things, right? Sometimes you're going to get ideas that seem like a really good idea at the time, but then you go, you know what, I better wait. Like one of the things that adults learn with email is don't email when you're angry. It's like don't go grocery shopping when you're really hungry, because you're just going to buy a whole lot of junk, and then you're getting home and go, what have I done? Especially after you eat it all. So there's a time and there's a place, there's a sense of accountability, there's a filter that's really helpful. Yik Yak doesn't have those things. And then this, what you saw on the TV shot there, what they're saying is, hey, this anonymity just helps people express themselves basically without being judged. That's fine. But then you have to go, but how's it being used? And then you have to ask the question of, if anonymity is such a big deal, why is that? Why is anonymity so important? Am I hiding behind something? What's my motive for being so interested in anonymity? These are questions that you have to ask as you go along. So Yik Yak was primarily created for college students. And one of the reasons why I'm showing it to you, I realize you're not in college, but if it's in college now, it's coming to you. Facebook started as a college app. The Facebook, right, in Harvard. Okay? Now Facebook is everywhere, very popular with parents and grandparents, which is why kids aren't interested in it anymore. All right? But if it's starting with college, that means it's coming. All right? So this is a heads up about things. So I want you to take a look at this. A couple of thoughts here. The first one is, and this is an issue with a lot of apps, the content may not be the problem, the amount of time you spend on it is. And you really have to, see, because to you, 24/7 access is normal. Just because it's normal doesn't mean it's okay, doesn't mean it's wise. And as Christians, we really have to be intentional about, is this taking over my life? Is this becoming more important than it should be? So it becomes an issue of degree, among other things. So clearly this is something that can become something which masters you. All right? Second part, and the cyberbullying. One of the things that we found is that if there are not accountability measures in place, if there aren't some filters, people tend to act poorly. Right? I mean, think about the classic scene when teenagers throw big parties at their house. When do they do this? When the parents are gone. Right? I mean, I can't imagine there's ever been a conversation, Mom and Dad, you guys going to be home Saturday night? Sweet, because I'm going to have friends over and we're going to get lit. It's going to be awesome. Right? That conversation does not happen. Right? The parents leave, make good choices, because we will. Right? And then it's a countdown to when things start, because the supervision is gone, the filters are gone, the accountability is gone. We don't tend to make great decisions when it's just us. Yet in terms of how we communicate, that's what Yik Yak is providing. All right? Continuing. And by the way, it says WSU right there. That is Wayne State University, not Washington State University. Yes, I'm sure you're heartbroken. All right. So take a look at this right here. Though Yik Yak is anonymous, courtesy is not required. One of the things you have to ask yourself is, all right, every app or website has its own subculture. So you say, what is expected in terms of how you behave? What are the rules of sorts? So again, if you have this idea of anything and everything, what we tend to find is people tend to fall to the bottom in terms of how they act, because there's no standards. There's no standards. Standards are a good thing. And then it says here, it's entertaining. This is quoting a student. It is an entertaining way of watching people. When they are anonymous, they say things they normally would not. So again, what you're seeing is, these are college kids saying this, the lack of filters causes problems. The lack of a sense of, I might have to be accountable for these words, causes a big problem. Yet if that's the selling point of the app, now you have to start asking the question, is that a good app? Right? Continuing. This is one from Oregon State, a little closer to home. The Oregon State University. Look at what it says here. Couple of thoughts. First one, it says, even though there are some entertaining posts, there are more posted and upliked that are sexist, racist, and expose dangerous activities. So one of the things you have to look at is say, okay, what seems to be the general content areas of this app or of this site. And one of the things that's really challenging for people, and I see this regularly, there are plenty of sites out there that have a lot of good stuff. They also have a lot of bad stuff, and they don't have any way of discriminating between the two. There's a couple of websites I've looked at recently where I've tried to say, okay, what are the filters? What are the content filters here? Are there any kind of parental controls? And they don't have them. And understand this, they don't have them for a reason. So they're not hard to create. They don't have them for a reason, which means you now have to make those decisions. And it may be a site where maybe I use this website, maybe I don't. Maybe I can't always navigate back and forth between what's healthy and what's appropriate. So sometimes you have to look at it as this, it's all in or all out. Others you may have a little bit more control, but you start to look at this, okay, what's the common theme of what's being used here? Second one, the main reason this app is so appalling is that it ruins the reputation of our campus and our university. So the person who wrote this article is concerned with something that we're going to talk about in a little bit, which is representation. Representation. And you know this, if you have ever been falsely quoted by someone else, and what was supposedly said by you was negative or hurtful to other people, and you didn't say it, are you okay with that? I don't know a lot of people that are like, nah, that's no big deal. We tend to be pretty outraged by that and like make it real clear, I did not say that. That's not me. There's a Facebook virus going around the other day, and I actually saw it before I knew about it because as I was looking through this person whose site, very upstanding person. There is nothing shady about their Facebook wall at all. And I was going through and I saw this picture. And it was an extremely graphic, inappropriate picture. And I thought, boy, that's weird. Especially for this person. Huh. And then a little later on, my apologies to anybody who has seen these pictures coming in my name. I've been hacked, and this has been going out. So very next day, I read an article that was explaining the virus that was going on. I said, now that makes sense. But I tell it to you for two reasons. One, whatever gets associated with your name, that's what people think. Representation is very, very powerful. Now, this person has always represented themselves with integrity and class. So therefore, when I saw something like this, I was able to go, boy, that seems weird, rather than, well, that makes sense. So your reputation always enters the room before you do. Your name carries a lot of weight. So how do you represent yourself? What this person is saying is, by the way our students are using Yik Yak, it's making our school, in this case Oregon State, look bad. And then finally this last part, different social media outlets have taken control of students' minds and attention. Now this makes people at Oregon State seem like a bunch of dopes, and they're not. But what it's showing you is people are just going along with it. They're not really thinking about it. It's really popular, they're kind of using it, and they may put it down. It's really stupid, I don't like it, it's kind of trashy, but do you use it? Well, yeah. So this idea of taking control of college students' minds and attentions, encouraging narcissism, bullying, and passiveness. In other words, narcissism, making myself look good, being mean to others, or just watching all this and not doing anything. Okay? You can't build a healthy community with narcissism, passivity, and meanness. Right? It's not happening. So from a Christian perspective, how do we think about this? I'd like to offer you 5 things to think about. The first one is this. We just talked about it. Is representation. Okay? Representation matters. God is concerned with representation. So it says this in 2 Corinthians 5:20. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ. You have to understand this. You never act for just yourself. If you have siblings, I've worked here 20 years. So if you have older siblings and they've gone through here, I know them, I've taught them, I've worked with them. You have seen, for positive or negative, the power of a name. Oh, are you so-and-so's sister? Or are you so-and-so's brother? They've gone before you and have created a reputation for your family, which may or may not make your life easier. Okay? So we always represent the name of Christ in whatever we do. So you never act alone in that sense. The scripture says we're ambassadors for Christ. We are teaching the world what Christianity is about. That just may or may not be accurate. Second one, civility. We've become a very uncivil culture, in part because we have a lot of means to say anything and do anything without any kind of a filter, any kind of accountability. If you know you're going to be accountable for the words that you say, it makes you think twice. So Ephesians 4:1-3 says this, I therefore, this is Paul writing, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling which you have been called. Listen to these characteristics and see if they sound like Yik Yak. With all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. What are you hearing from college campuses? What did you see in the news clip that I showed you? This stuff is ripping us apart. It's making our whole college look bad. It's causing friendships to go down the drain. Kids are getting in trouble. There's no accountability. When that's the case, things don't go well. Next one, kindness. 1 Corinthians 13:4, love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy or boast, it is not arrogant. See, bullying in part is an arrogance problem. Because what it says is, I matter more than you do, so I can treat you however I want. And that's never the case. And so when you've got a culture that says anything goes, why not? And this idea of kindness means to go out of your way to do something nice for somebody else. That's done intentionally. Fourth one is integrity. Proverbs 10:9 says, whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out. See, one of the real issues that we have is that when we're just using, a phone is very small, right? Here's my iPhone 5. This is not a big device. The reach of this device, however, is massive. And so when we type something, when we put something out, we have a tendency to think it's right here, it's right now, it's kind of gone and done for. And anybody who's ever gotten themselves in hot water with a post never thought that was going to happen. Their intent was not, I really hope this backfires on me and kind of wrecks my life. But when that happens, you kind of go, well, what did you think was going to happen? At some point, you get found out. At some point, life turns the lights on and you get exposed. You're either shown to be a person of character and integrity or a person who is not. And that, talk about representation, that is not a reputation that you want to have. And finally, this last one of identity. This is one of the big concerns that I have as a dad, but also just someone who works with kids in 2015. We have a tendency to see ourselves through the lens of our social media apps. Either in terms of how we act, either kind of an alter ego, or we base our value on how we are responded to. How many group texts am I part of? How many likes did I get? How many people are contacting me? Or people just tell you who you are. This is the problem with cyberbullying. It's just a way of saying, hey, you're less. And that really gets internalized. And to a certain point, you never really get over that. And so Colossians 3:4 says, when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. If you are a Christian, your identity now is Christ. You represent Christ. Goes back to the very first one, for we are ambassadors. We represent. So again, your name, your life is a gift to you. You don't own it. And we are called to speak life into other people. We do not have the right to do otherwise. All right? So this idea of should I consider Yik Yak? Because you're going to have to make this decision. This app is coming your way. And sooner than later. And we have to do this all the time with movies that are coming out. I mean, the big movie coming out this Friday is 50 Shades of Grey. And if you know anything about that movie, probably not one you should see. But a lot of people are going to see it. They're not really going to think through it. And once you see things, you cannot unsee them. So you have to be cautious. And Scripture says this. I'm going to leave you with this idea before we get to some questions. So, Mr. Nelson, if you want to make your way up here, we can start. 1 Corinthians 10:23 says this: all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. So we live in this culture where it's like, hey, you want to download an app? It's easy. Something you're going to be able to do. But just because you can doesn't mean necessarily that you should. There are quite a few apps that I have chosen, just in terms of my personal integrity, not to use, even though, for the most part, they're perfectly harmless apps. But in thinking about how I'm wired and who I am, and perhaps where I'm tempted or where I'm weak, I say, you know what? Having that app is not what I need. So I've chosen not to have it, which is a shame because there's a lot of good stuff there. But this is the way we have to think through things, and it's going to increase more and more and more as we go. So let's take a couple of questions here. I got a chair for you up here already. Yeah. It's a 1970s bar stool, so don't say I don't do anything nice for you, all right? So a couple questions, and you can answer these as well.
No.
I'm just kidding. It's okay.
All right, we got a few today, and a few at the end that I really liked. Mr. Olson, does this mean that all websites without parental controls are bad?
No. I think a lot of it is you have to know where you're vulnerable. You have to know where you're susceptible to temptation. And that could be temptation of spending just too much time, getting too wrapped up in it, or the actual content of it. But no, there's plenty of sites out there that don't have any controls that are okay. But a lot of it starts with you. Who am I? And what's healthy for me? And in a sense, what's unhealthy for me? And think through it that way.
And this may be obvious to some of us, but to some of us it doesn't make any sense. But a question I got from a few people was, why was an app like this created? Why would developers create something? Don't they see the negative side of nameless communication application? And I think it's pretty obvious to me, as someone who has friends that try and get into app development and things like that, and there's money. There's money involved. And it's a race. Somebody gets an idea and they have to come out with it before anybody else does. I had a good friend who was in the process of developing a app that he was really excited about, and it was a trivia app. And right when he had sent it off to somebody to create a development, like a prototype and a beta for it, out comes, you guys know? Who has Trivia Crack? Do you know how much money Trivia Crack makes based on advertisement? I don't. But it's a lot.
Probably not as much as the Kardashian app.
No, that's probably. But yeah, it's a race. So, sometimes when you're developing these apps and you're in this mad dash to see who gets it out first, you don't take into consideration, the negative implications or what could go wrong. It's just who can get it out first.
And I think part of what they do is, if it does go sideways, you blame the user. Well, that was a choice you made. That's your fault. That's what I said. You have to come back to, just because it's there doesn't mean that you should. And there's a thought process that says, okay, because it's here, this seems to be what it's about. This seems to be what the culture of the app is. That's not good for me, so I'm gonna stay away. And because a lot of people, they're not thinking about that. And morality doesn't always pay. But we have to be people who are intentional about that.
One that I've been getting, which I'm okay with, but sometimes people text into this number and say they challenge the idea of us answering these questions. Or, for instance, one I got today was about Dear Abby. Dear Abby is something that the student council is promoting, and it's been trying to promote since last semester. But the question is, isn't the anonymity of the Dear Abby and Dear Abby number the same problem as Yik Yak, with the fact that someone can say something disrespectful or unrelated to chapel? And that's a good question, except for the difference between it is Dear Abby is a parentally controlled, if it were an app. So it goes through a screening process, and it's formed by a number of peers, not just anybody can write something and the student council's not just going to throw it up on the board like graffiti. It's not going to be like that.
Right. Yeah. And again, I think anonymity comes down to, well, what's the motive here? Sometimes anonymity is important because if there's a question that you have or there's a struggle that you're going through, if you can ask that question to a person or people who can help you and do so in a way that says, okay, their response tells me it's safe to go further, that's healthy. But using anonymity as a shield to behave badly is not good. And that's a big, big difference.
Yeah. I'm getting a lot of questions. I'm going to generalize these, but it's asking apps such as Instagram and other apps, can those be dangerous too?
Absolutely. I'm not on Instagram. And here's why. Instagram, for the most part, is harmless. It's pictures. But not all of it is. And there are elements to Instagram which, for me, Mike Olson, are not healthy or helpful. So for me, I realized that, and so I got off. And so that's not a statement that says you have to do that. I'm just talking for me. That's a decision I came to. Because for me, here's what's at stake. For starters, my relationship with God. Okay. On a next level, my relationship with my wife. On a next level, my relationship with my 3 kids. And my relationship with my 3 kids is more complicated in certain regards. This is why representation matters. Because my 3 kids have my last name, which means what people think of me is going to affect what people think of my 3 kids. 2 of whom go here, 1 will go to 3 points next year.